I knew it was going to be bad when he walked in, spotted me, and gave a little wave that was more of a stiff-fingered salute. His glasses were slightly askew, and he had the faint, dusty scent of old paper about him, which was oddly specific for a man who had just been outside. "Katie? I'm Liam. Apologies for my tardiness. The bus schedule was optimistic." "No worries," I said, my voice a notch too bright. The bar none was loud, and we'd been given the worst table, sandwiched between the restrooms and a speaker bleeding tinny synth pop. He sat, folding himself onto the stool with the careful precision of someone assembling flat-pack furniture. The silence that descended wasn't comfortable, it was a vacuum, sucking all the potential joy out of the evening. I launched into my standard first date small talk. "So, Liam, what do you do when you're not battling public transit?" He leaned forward, and for a second, I thought he was going to say something flirty. "I'm an architectural historian. Currently, I'm cataloging the unique brickwork patterns in the historic downtown district. Did you know that the variation in the Flemish bond on the old library suggests a different bricklayer was brought in for the second story?" I blinked. "Fascinating," I lied, taking a large gulp of my wine. I was a Merlot girl, through and through. He'd ordered a Pinot Noir for us without asking, pronouncing it Pinot Noir, with a hard T. I let it slide. Maybe he was nervous. I tried again. "What about for fun? Any guilty pleasure TV shows?" "I'm currently mainlining that ridiculous dating show, Love Island." He looked at me, his head tilted as if I were a fascinatingly unstable load-bearing wall. "I don't own a television." The noise is disruptive to contemplation. The pause that followed was so deep I could have spelunked in it. I felt a familiar dread pooling in my stomach. Another one. Another nice, handsome, utterly incompatible man. Desperate, I gestured to his drink. "This is a nice Pinot," I said, mimicking his pronunciation just a little. He took a sip, swirled it, and said, "Yes, this Merlot has a surprisingly bold character." I stared at him. The glass in my hand felt suddenly heavy. He'd just corrected my, intentionally incorrect, pronunciation with the wrong grape. He didn't even know what he was drinking. The entire date condensed into that single, ridiculous moment. I wasn't on a date with a man, I was on a date with a Wikipedia page that had learned to wear chinos. The rest of the hour was a slow-motion train wreck. He told me his hobby was the quiet appreciation of well-organized spice racks. I made a joke about my cat plotting world domination, and he asked, entirely seriously, if I had data to support her strategic capabilities. When the bill came, he calculated his share to the exact cent, including tax, but not tip, because that was a subjective societal addendum. We walked out into the cool night air, and he extended his hand for a shake. A handshake. My palm felt dry and lonely against his. "It was informative, Katie," he said. "Yeah, I managed. A real education." I watched him walk away, a tall, orderly figure disappearing into the chaotic city, and I felt a hot wave of frustration wash over me. It wasn't even about him, not really. It was the accumulation of a dozen similar dates, of feeling unseen, unheard, and utterly bored. I was a romantic comedy heroine trapped in a documentary about murder. I marched home, my heels clicking a furious staccato on the pavement. I burst into my apartment, kicked off my shoes, and poured myself a very large, very correct glass of Merlot. My laptop glowed on the coffee table like a beacon. My anonymous blog, Bad Date Bingo, was my secret shame and my salvation. It was where I turned tragedy into content. The words poured out of me, sharp and hot with vindictive glee. I titled the post a one-star man, a review of Liam. Let's be clear, this isn't a man, it's a spreadsheet masquerading as a person, I typed, my fingers flying. Pros, he will never be late on his taxes. Cons, he might try to calculate the emotional ROI of holding your hand. His favorite pastime is alphabetizing his library, by the Dewey Decimal System. He mispronounced Pinot Noir and then called it a Merlot. The only spark that flew all night was from the static electricity of his polyester blend sweater. I detailed the handshake, the spice racks, the brickwork. I painted a picture of a man so boring he could make a documentary on grass growth seem like a thrill ride. It was cruel. It was mean. And in the moment, with the wine warming my veins and my indignation at a boiling point, it felt utterly justified. Final verdict, I wrote, a final, flippant stab of my keyboard. Would not recommend. Save your currency, ladies, both emotional and monetary. I hit publish with a satisfying click. A wave of catharsis washed over me. There. I'd taken the lump of coal this date had given me and turned it into a sharp, glittering diamond of disdain. I closed my laptop, finished my wine, and went to bed, feeling vindicated. The vindication lasted exactly until the next morning. I woke up to a phone screen blazing with notifications. My best friend, Chloe, had texted me a screenshot of my blog post. It was followed by a string of crying laughing emojis and the words, "OMG Katie, is this you? This is hilarious. Sarah shared it and it's going viral in the local group." My blood ran cold. Viral? I fumbled for my laptop, my heart hammering against my ribs. I opened the blog. The view count was in the thousands. Comments flooded in. Dead. I think I dated his brother. This is the funniest thing I've ever read. My stomach twisted into a hard, cold knot. This wasn't a private joke anymore. This was a public execution. I saw his face again, not as the boring date, but as a human being, awkward, maybe, but who had shown up, who had tried in his own bizarre way. And I had eviscerated him for a global audience. The guilt was immediate and suffocating. What had I done? I was no longer the witty heroine of my own story. I was the villain. And I had a horrible, sinking feeling that my one-star review was about to come back and rate my entire life. The next 48 hours were a special kind of self-inflicted purgatory. I felt like I was wearing a sign that said, "Local Monster," in neon letters. Every ping of my phone was a fresh jolt of anxiety. I couldn't eat, I could barely work. I just refreshed that damned blog post, watching the comment count climb, a digital monument to my own cruelty. Chloe called, her voice shifting from amused to concerned. "Okay, the initial buzz is dying down. You want me to report the post? Have it taken down?" "No," I mumbled, staring at my blurry reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. "That would be cowardly. I just have to sit in the mess I made." It was the Tuesday after the date that shall not be named when I finally saw it. I was refreshing the page for what felt like the thousandth time, my cursor hovering over the delete button, my courage failing me as it had every other time. And then, a new comment appeared at the very top. The username was Liam_archives. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted through the floor, through the foundation of my building, and kept going straight to the earth's core. This was it. The furious, well-deserved rebuttal. The public shaming that would finally match my own. I squeezed my eyes shut for a 3 count, bracing for the impact of his wrath. When I opened them, I forced myself to read. His comment wasn't a paragraph. It was a carefully constructed essay. Liam_archives, verified user, it began. Rating, 5 stars for accuracy and prose style. I blinked, sure I was hallucinating from stress and a diet comprised solely of toast and regret. A surprisingly fair and witty assessment, he'd written. Most of this is painfully accurate. I do, in fact, alphabetize my spices. However, I must dispute one critical point for the record. My breath hitched. Here it comes, I thought. The correction about the wine, or the brickwork. The real, justifiable anger. You misheard my favorite movie. When you asked, the music swelled, and I panicked. I said, The Sound of Music, because my nephew had just performed in the school play and it was on my mind. My actual favorite film is The Princess Bride. You know, As You Wish, fencing, rodents of unusual size, the whole deal. The air left my lungs in a single, quiet whoosh. The Princess Bride. It was my favorite movie too. The one I watched when I was sick or sad or needed to believe in grand, storybook romance. It felt like he'd reached through the screen and gently disarmed me. My snarky, sophisticated armor suddenly felt cheap and flimsy. I kept reading, my vision blurring. It seems we both presented curated, and perhaps less than stellar, versions of ourselves that night. Your review was brilliant, if brutal. I'm sorry our date was such a disappointment. He was apologizing to me. The world tilted on its axis. This wasn't anger. This was grace. A grace I absolutely, unequivocally did not deserve. So, reviewer, a question, want to try again? No spreadsheets, no structural engineering. Just 2 people who are clearly better on paper, or screen, than in a noisy bar. Liam. I read it again. And again. The words, better on paper, or screen, echoed in my mind. He saw me. He saw the real, writing me, the one I hid behind the snark. And he wasn't running away. He was asking to meet her. A single, hot tear escaped and splashed onto my keyboard. I was crying. Crying over a comment on a brutal blog post I'd written. What was happening to me? My phone buzzed. Chloe. Katie. Did you see it? I saw it, I whispered, my voice thick. What are you going to do? This is the most romantic thing I have ever read in my entire life. He's not mad, he's charmed by your takedown of him. It's not romantic, it's psychotic, I said, but the conviction wasn't there. It was being steadily eroded by a tidal wave of awe and a terrifying, fluttering hope. It's not. It's him saying he sees the real you, and he likes her. The you that writes those brilliant, savage things. Now message him back before he changes his mind. I ended the call, my hands trembling. I stared at the comment box. What could I possibly say? Sorry I publicly eviscerated you, yes, let's get coffee? After an hour of typing and deleting, of my own words feeling clunky and inadequate next to his elegant response, I finally navigated to the site's private message function. My finger hovered over the send button for a full minute. I took a shaky breath and typed. Okay, you've officially thrown me for a loop. I owe you a massive apology. That post was cruel and out of line. I'm so sorry. I hit send before I could lose my nerve. The message status showed delivered. I stared at it, my heart pounding. What if he'd changed his mind? What if his comment was just a final, grand gesture before blocking me forever? Then, a miracle. The status changed to read. 3 little dots appeared. They bounced. They disappeared. They bounced again. The suspense was a physical ache. Finally, his reply came. Apology accepted. Though I maintain it was some of your best work. A wet laugh escaped me, a confused mix of a sob and a chuckle. He was funny. He had a dry, understated wit I'd been too blinded by my own expectations to see. The dots appeared again. So, about that second date? I promised to pronounce the wine correctly this time. I looked around my quiet, messy apartment, at the life I'd built where I was the snarky observer, never the vulnerable participant. I thought of the man on the other side of the screen, who had taken my worst and handed back understanding. He was offering me a chance to meet the man who loved the princess bride, not the caricature I'd created. My fingers, now steadier, typed out a reply. Okay. But this time, I'm picking the place. I chose a picnic in the park. It was neutral territory, bathed in soft, afternoon sunlight, far from the memory of noisy bars and terrible wine. It was also, I reasoned, impossible to mispronounce a sandwich. I arrived early, my stomach a tangled knot of nerves. I'd brought a blanket and a basket with enough food to feed a small, anxious army. I smoothed down my sundress for the 10th time just as I saw him walking towards me. My breath caught. He looked the same, yet completely different. The same thoughtful eyes, the same slightly too formal button-down shirt, but he was carrying a small, slightly lopsided bunch of daisies, and he was smiling, a real, tentative smile that reached his eyes. Hi, he said, stopping a few feet away, as if giving me space to run. Hi. The word came out as a whisper. I gestured lamely to the blanket. Picked a place with better acoustics. For contemplation. His smile widened. It's perfect. We settled onto the blanket, a careful foot of space between us. The silence that fell was different this time, not a vacuum, but a held breath, full of potential. I brought provisions, I said, unloading the basket. No Merlot was harmed in the making of this picnic. Just lemonade. A wise choice. He accepted a glass, his fingers brushing mine. A simple, electric shock. And for the record, he added, his tone light, I know it's Pinot Noir. I was just, incredibly nervous. I stared at him. You were nervous? Terrified. He took a sip of lemonade. You were this incredibly vibrant, clever woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I panicked and defaulted to the most academic, boring parts of myself. It's a defense mechanism. Like a squid spraying ink. A laugh bubbled out of me, surprised and genuine. You're comparing yourself to a cephalopod? It's an apt analogy. I create a cloud of tedium to hide in. We talked then, truly talked. The wall I'd built, and the one he'd hidden behind, just crumbled away. He told me about writing historical articles for a magazine, his voice warming with passion. It's just storytelling, really. finding the narrative in the stone and mortar. That's when I understood. He wasn't a spreadsheet. He was an archivist of beautiful, forgotten stories. That's why you liked the review, I said slowly, the realization dawning on me. It wasn't just the brutal honesty. It was the narrative. He looked at me, his gaze so direct it felt like a physical touch. It's not often someone eviscerates you with such perfect comma placement and a compelling story arc. You're a brilliant writer, Katie. No one had ever said that to me and made me believe it. My freelance work was just words for paychecks. My blog was a secret outlet for poison. He saw the craft in both. The sun dipped lower, casting long, golden shadows. We'd finished the food, and the space between us had unconsciously shrunk to mere inches. The air was sweet with the smell of cut grass and this new, terrifying hope. I knew I had to ask. I had to be as brave as he had been. Liam, I began, my voice soft. Why did you really respond like that? You should have been furious with me. You should have written a scathing one-star review of me as a human being. He was quiet for a moment, plucking a blade of grass. Because you were right, he said finally, his voice low. I was hiding. I've always been the quiet one, the brainy one. I lean into it on dates because it's easier than risking the real me being rejected. Your review, it was like you held up a mirror. A very harsh, one-star mirror, but a mirror nonetheless. It made me realize I didn't like the guy I was presenting to the world either. You saw straight through him, and you annihilated him. And all I could think was, I wish she could see me now. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring his face. His vulnerability was the most disarming thing I'd ever encountered. The real me, I said, my voice cracking, is the jerk who posts things online for clicks. The real me is terrified of being boring, of being hurt, so she makes a joke out of everything first. The real me isn't nearly as brave as you. He reached out then, his hand covering mine on the blanket. His touch was warm, solid. So let's promise the real us gets a fair shot. No reviews, good or bad. Just this. I looked down at our joined hands, then back up at him, my heart so full I thought it might burst. A slow, true smile spread across my face. As you wish, I said softly. His eyes, which had been watching me with such careful intensity, lit up. He recognized the line, the depth of it, the surrender in it. It wasn't just a quote, it was a promise. He didn't kiss me. He leaned in slowly, his free hand coming up to cradle my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek. He paused, his forehead resting against mine, his breath mingling with mine. It was more intimate than any kiss I'd ever had, a silent conversation of understanding, forgiveness, and a beginning. I closed my eyes, breathing him in, this man of quiet contemplation and unexpected courage. A month later, I was at my laptop, but the screen was blank. The bad date bingo tab was permanently closed. I opened a new document, a private journal entry. I wrote about picnics and daisies, and the quiet joy of learning the stories behind someone's walls. I wrote about how the man who alphabetized his spices also knew how to make me laugh until I cried, and how his organized, predictable world had somehow made room for my beautiful, chaotic one. From the living room, I could hear him humming. I looked over the back of the couch. Liam was standing in front of my bookshelf, which had always been organized by the chaotic spirit of wherever it fits. He wasn't using the Dewey Decimal System. He was carefully, deliberately, rearranging the books by the color of their spines, creating a haphazard rainbow. He caught me looking and gave me a small, secret smile. I turned back to my screen, my heart so full it felt like a physical warmth in my chest. And so, I typed, the words flowing easily, I'm officially retiring from writing reviews. Some things are too precious to be rated. Some connections are so perfect, they break the scale entirely. Final verdict, he's a 5-star man. And I'm finally, happily, off the market.